Hi, my name is Joochan Kim, and my group members are Seong Hong, Kyu Bae, Hyunji Jo, Michael Pintucci, Jason Skinner, and our topic is prostitution in Korean culture through movies. Hyunji will do history and cultural review, Kyu Bae will do foreign influence, Jason Skinner will also do foreign influence of Western culture movies, and Joochan Kim and Seong Hong will do the Korean representation of prostitution in Korean movies. And Michael Pinucci will end this presentation with terminology and comparison and societal issues. The definition of prostitution is defined as the practice or occupation of engaging in sexual activity with someone for payment. We will be discussing what exactly prostitution means and the personal, social, and cultural implications it has with it.
The history of the sex trade and sex trafficking can be an influential part in the history of Korea. It has a historical background that goes beyond the Joseon dynasty as stated as Gibang. A woman who is to encourage excitement by singing, dancing, or drinking in festivals or drinking parties is called giseng. Many people think that giseng is prostitution, but it is not true. There are three types, which are: first is the giseng, who is designated celebrity by government. They never did prostitute, and they usually work in medical clinic. And when Joseon has a huge event, they are invited as the celebrity. For example, when a minister from other country comes and they go. Second is Peggy, who is also entertainer, but they secretly do prostitute. Hang is one of the well-known giseng. It belongs to Peggy. And third is Peggy, who does prostitute in Gibang. And prostitution was not allowed in Joseon, but not really regulated. Also, through the modern era, the sex trade industry in Korea has advanced to become a culture of the Korean society. It could be seen that Korea has one of the largest sex trade industry with the finest quality, with its socio-historical background.
Birdie Baby, 1978, directed by Louis Mao, is about the life of the prostitute Hattie and her 12-year-old daughter. They live at the brothel where Hattie makes a living by engaging in sexual activities. When Violet got older, she has also become a prostitute where her virginity was sold to the customer at the brothel. Hattie marries a wealthy client and moves to St. Louis, leaving Violet behind. Violet falls in love with Belloc and moves in with him. Hattie falls in love with a wealthy client and ends up marrying him even though she is a prostitute. Violet finds a man that does not only want to have sex with her. Hattie and Violet are accepted regardless of their title of prostitute. And how would the Korean society view Violet? Another movie is Working Girls, 1986, directed by Lizzie Borden. The main character, Molly, is a pretty Yale graduate with an English literature and art history degree. Dawn is also a beautiful woman in her 20s studying for a law degree. Their club is safe and does not involve any drugs. Nobody has been threatened by any clients. These women are there because the pay is good. It is just like any other job that is high in pay and flexible hours. This movie also does not.
When we look at some Western films, we notice that the idea of prostitution in these movies is not quite the same as Korean movies. In the Western movies, we see more of an acceptance to this lifestyle. One example of this is the movie Pretty Woman, where it shows a woman who meets the man, and when she's hired, they gradually become close to each other and start to fall in love. By the end of the movie, they actually are in love and live happily ever after. Now, when we look at this type of movie, we see that she is not a bad person in the movie. She is not a dirty person in the movie. She is just somebody who is struggling and working towards a certain goal. By the end of the movie, obviously, she marries the man and lives happily ever after. There are a lot of movies that have the idea of prostitution in them that do not reflect it as a negative thing, as it is just a part of society. The movie Catch Me If You Can talks about Frank Jr. at different stages of his life, but at one stage he is in a hotel room and he finds himself with a prostitute. During the movie, this is just a natural occurrence for him, and it does not show the prostitute as being evil or negative to society. It's just a matter of she is there and this is what happens.
In Korea, it is very hard to find films that has or contains sexual themes unless it is about erotic adult-oriented movies. Koreans become very hesitated when it comes to these dark sexual themes such as prostitution or rape or etc. I guess this is because long history of Confucianism in Korea. They just don't like mention about or talk about immoral subject. But anyway, this is picture of director Kim Ki-duk, and he's the one who made many movies and became successful with aggressive and sexual dark themes. He won lots of film awards as well, and most of his films are based on terrible reality of Korea. The first poster is a movie called Samaritan Girl, and it is filmed by Kim Ki-duk. This is about teenager prostitution in Korea. It contains harsh reality. So, for example, it is about students who sells their bodies for money, and there are many adults who buys them for their sexual orientation, and society or other those people do not really care about such issues. Second, it's 나쁜 남자. This was actually made before Samaritan Girl and also filmed by Kim Ki-duk as well. This film shows how one girl become working girl or prostitution because of a debt that she owes. She has to work as a prostitution and denies to provide services. But as time goes and she works more as a working girl, she becomes incredibly good at the services. It shows how one person can ruin another person's life, and many of the places in the movies shows very specific location, such as 직장촌, which is brothel in Korea, in English. This third movie is about Beastie Boys. This is a movie about people, mans who works as a host in the host bar. In these days, there are a lot of host bars in Korea, and you can actually see how they work and what kind of service that they provide to people or women. So reality versus movies. The survey shows a number of prostitution occurring in Korea through many methods and places. There are a lot, incredibly a lot. That's 80 million or 8 million, and there are 4,917 women who works as a prostitution or night shift.
As talked about by my members, the movie that I picked is The Treacherous that came out at 2015, and it's a good movie about the social historical components of prostitution and gender inequality. The movie takes place in Joseon Dynasty and aims to find the best female body for sexuality. Formal justifications were to find the bride of the king, but in the movie, terminologies like prostitute and sex focused themes were very present. And also, female representation of being inferior and exposed to sex are commonly shown as well. As the film is based upon non-fictional stories of Joseon Dynasty, the socio-historical lineage of prostitution and informal night culture are rationalized in the movie. Through these films, we can see that it has a very descent lineage towards the night culture we have in the current society. And the second movie that I want to talk about is The Inside Men that was came out at 2015, and it showed a very good version of modern sense of sex work that's illustrated in the movie. The movie was not about sex trade industry or anything about prostitution, but it was about an inside man trying to unveil corruptness in the government state apparatus. However, there were scenes that were very offending to gender, and the culture that is showed through the scenes were very discriminative and prejudiced towards women. And concepts like the room salon and sex work were strongly inhibited in the movie as well. So negative implications of women as inferior, weak, and used for sex are typically shown. Also, hidden ideologies of women serving men are also present in the scenarios. This shows that there's a lot of concepts that intertwine gender with sex and sex work, even though it's not really incorporated in the scenes as well. The hidden themes that lie under the sceneries create these ideologies that embed into the people of Korea and other lands. Both movies have time frameworks and have real life relations. And also, the two movies surround between sexuality and gender. These movies persuade the audience of ideas of inferiority and sex work to women in general, and not only to prostitutes. The problem of these depictions in Korean movie is that it creates generalizations and gender prejudices. Sex work as inferior occupation are present in Korean culture different from Western view.
Hi, my name is Michael Pintucci, and I'll be discussing in our group about the terminology and the comparison between the Western world and Korea. So, terminology, prostitution. This group will be discussing about the idea of prostitution in Korea versus the Western world, places like Canada and the US and stuff like that. So, prostitution is defined as the practice or occupation of engaging in sexual activity with someone for payment. Comfort woman, however, is a Korean woman who has been forced by the Japanese military to serve and be used for sexual purposes. Comfort woman has affected a wider range than just Korean women, but in relation to this course and what the group is talking about, we'll be discussing primarily with the idea of and the actuality of Korean women specifically. So what's the difference? Between the two, prostitution may have happened globally and by choice, whereas comfort women are specific to the women of Korea, most notably. But comfort women were also affected, like women in Japan and China as well were affected and used as comfort women. But again, we'll be talking mostly and most notably about Korean women. So one of the key differences between prostitutes and comfort women is consent. So prostitutes in the Western world are now known as sex workers, and they may choose to be in that line of work, whereas comfort women were forced into the roles as prostitutes. So they didn't choose to be comfort women; they were forced by the military to be comfort women. So while still not ideal and particularly accepted, sex workers in the Western world are still more protected and have more rights than comfort women would have had, especially in times of war and for the Japanese military. So prostitutes in Korea are socially looked down upon, as well as having this idea of women who engage in sex before marriage or outside of procreation are looked down upon. So the women in Korea and the role of women in Korea, in part, is keeping their chastity and their purity for men in the family. Women are seen as less than if they engage in sex that's not for the purpose of procreation, where men typically have more freedom to do that. In more recent years in Korea, however, there has been a surge of women who demand having the freedom to be seen as sexual beings and not just simply for use of the men. My opinion. So when it comes to the rights of prostitutes specifically, I believe that people and women should have the freedom and safety to take the paths that they choose. If they need to be sex workers, if they need to provide, they should have the freedom and right, and they should be protected in that need. I don't believe, and women as a whole, I don't believe they should be seen as less than or less than people because they choose to have sex, especially when men have the freedom to. So I think women just as equally have the right to be sexual beings and to accept and embrace that part of them in society.
In conclusion, if you agree with it, it's to intensify human right anti-prostitution law has caused the spread of prostitution into residential areas secretly. And secondly, sexual self-determination. Sexual self-determination is the right of an individual to freely choose and decide the matters related to his or her sexual performance. And if you disagree, it's rather being commercializing sex, which is ethically wrong. And if prostitution is allowed legally, minors aged 13 or over can also be prostitutes because according to the Korean Constitution of Article 10, the age to be subject of sexual self-determination is 13 years old. So it's a controversy that's in Korean society and in Western culture too. So you should also think about that too. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Thank you.